Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here for another Ask Mrs. HR Live. Typically, I noticed when I was looking at my videos, I'm checking my hair, and I just love this style. I love these braids, and I just wanted to give a shout out to the Crown Act, a California law, which prohibits discrimination based on hairstyle and hair texture by extending protection under the FEHA and the California Education Code. So to get really technical, there is policy that was created to protect us, all people. So basically when Black people are protected, all people are protected. Please remember that. To wear your hair however you want, as long, to wear your natural hair. And honestly, in my career, being, the Generation X person that I am, early in my career, it was looked down on to wear braids or cornrows to work. It was considered unprofessional. So, hey, Quiet Storm, thanks for joining. So I just want to give a shout out. I love my hair and I love my shirt. I want to show you. It says, "Let's talk policy, not politics." So that's what I want to talk about today. Really briefly on Ask Mrs. HR Live. I get a lot of questions about what can you talk about in the workplace. And of course, we are running into an election year, a very, very controversial, tumultuous, emotional election year. How do we deal with this in the workplace? We handle it by talking about policies, not politics. So let's talk about the question that came to me this week, and I've had a few people ask me about Project 2025 and how it will affect employees and employers. So I know a lot of us have been hearing about Project 2025. I'm going to try to tell you in like 30 seconds what it is, because that's a loaded question, but simply Project 2025 was created by Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation, and he basically established, along with his cronies or team, whoever, established Project 2025 with the goal of building a governing agenda, not just for next January, but long into the future. And it is basically a conservative policy initiative aimed at preparing a detailed plan for the next Republican administration to implement sweeping changes in government policy. So it includes proposals to reduce federal regulations, cut social safety net programs, roll back various civil rights protections, which can be enacted through executive branch actions without requiring new legislation. So basically, when you hear it can be enacted through executive branch actions without requiring new legislation, it basically means they will be able to make these changes without the people having to vote for it, or without it going through the current method of having to go on to be a bill and to be voted for. So basically, they'll just be able to make the changes through the executive branch of government without the people having to vote. So some of the Project 25 bullet points is to cut overtime protections for 4.3 million workers, to stop efforts to lower prescription drug prices. And there's a whole list. I would definitely recommend, like I always do, that you do your research and just Google Project 2025. A lot of times we talk about things that doesn't seem real, but this is real. It will push more of the 33 million people enrolled in Medicare towards Medicare Advantage. It can affect people in foster care, so on and so on. But ultimately, it will roll back civil rights protections across multiple fronts. So I started by talking about my beautiful hair, which I love, which is protected by the Crown Act. So that's an example of a civil rights protection, the Crown Act. And one of the protections I'm going to get into, because the question was, what is Project 25, which I answered, and how will it affect employees and employers? So think about, I'm just going to start with one, because this is like a webinar. It could be a webinar, so I want to answer some of your question. But think about overtime protections. So in terms of employers, If overtime is no longer protected, employers will find it easier to manage labor costs. They won't need to pay overtime to 4.3 million workers. And so think about big companies, big corporations. They are going to be thrilled. Companies like that are owned by very rich people, they will save even more money because they won't have to pay overtime to employees. And so for businesses and big businesses, slashing overtime protections is a win. Yay, we don't have to pay overtime. So how does that impact employees? So for the everyday person who does not own a business, the removal of overtime protections could lead to decreased earnings for many, many workers, especially those in lower wage positions. So take someone who's making minimum wage or even making, $15, $20 an hour. They will not get that extra overtime if they work more than 40 hours a week. So also, employees may also face longer working hours without additional compensation, which will lead to dissatisfaction and burnout and probably sheer chaos. But that's just one example of how the Project 25 rolls into and is definitely going to see some changes if that occurs with Project 25, if that's able to be passed through. There will be many other civil rights situations that will happen in the workplace that will be the result of Project 2025.